And you know what happened? All of the member banks from the Federal Reserve just came in and bought those banks, eliminating the competition, wiping it all out. And somehow this wasn't illegal. So they've contracted the money supply back then, and they put it in the hands of just a small group of banks. And now there is no competition in the banking industry. No real competition. Louis McFadden came out and he spoke to Congress about all of the evils of the Federal Reserve. Back in the 1930s, 1932 I believe it was, either 32 or 33. He gave a big presentation to Congress about all of the money and all the different places that the Federal Reserve was sending the people's money, Americans' money. So they killed him. What's the most important thing to the Federal Reserve? It's war. If anybody thinks that the Federal Reserve is not in some way, shape, or form directly responsible for most of the wars that we were in, if not all the wars that we were in, there's no incentive. Americans in general do not like to go to war. Anytime we've held a poll, we don't want to go to war. We have to be coaxed into going to war. Who's incented to going into war? Federal Reserve. Nothing makes a country borrow money faster than war. Hey, we need to build a whole bunch of boats. We need to build a whole bunch of ships. But you know what? The Federal Reserve's got a printing press of money. And they can just give other countries money whenever they want. And we don't know. So they do. The Federal Reserve loves war. War creates a demand. And they can finance both sides. And they often do. The great thing about war is, I'm going to go on a little tangent, it's the GDP. So we all know what the GDP is, gross domestic product. It's a wonderful thing that the Federal Reserve loves about war. When we talk about the GDP, we usually think that you get something. So I go out and I build a car, and then there's a car that exists. There's an asset out there. When I go out and I build a house, there's an asset out there. When I educate somebody and somebody pays for that education, there's an asset. Society has in some way, shape, or form grown or improved. But when you create a bomb, the bomb blows up. The GDP goes up because money was spent. But there is no asset. We have not added anything to society when we build things for war. Not only that, but we've created a vacuum, which requires more money to rebuild it. So not only don't we have those assets anymore, but we've created a vacuum that requires the printing of more money, which is just debt. The Fed loves war. They enabled it. World War I. Edward House and Edward Grey. Edward Grey from Britain. Edward House from America. This is a guy who holds, office. American person who is advising our president. And he's in collusion with Edward Grey, trying to figure out, hey, you know what? America doesn't want to enter World War I. The Americans don't want to do it. So they spent time to figure out how they could convince the American public to go to war. The U.S., in the meantime, claimed neutrality. So what did they decide to do? They say, hey, you know what? It would be a great idea, these two guys, it would be a great idea if we could figure out how to kill a bunch of American people. Let's kill a bunch of American people and piss off the American public so much that they want to go to war. So they take the Lusitania, they put a bunch of Americans on it, they send it into British waters, and the Brits knew they were going to do it. The Brits knew that this was going on. The Brits knew so much that they actually stuck ads in the newspaper. This is an ad from one of the New York newspapers that the Germans bought. The Germans bought ads in 50 newspapers telling people, do not go on the Lusitania because we know what you're going to do. You're going to sail it into waters. We're not going to know that it's not a British ship and we're going to blow it up. But you know what? Americans didn't listen. A lot of people died. A lot of people didn't realize that ads like that existed. A lot of people didn't realize that these two guys were talking. A lot of people didn't realize or pay attention. So we were pulled into war. Another individual, Robert Lansing, Assistant Secretary of State, stated right on the Senate floor, we must educate the public gradually and draw it along to the point where it will be willing to go into the war. These are our politicians pulling us to death. What's the real cost? World War I, 323,000 American lives during that period of time for financing this wonderful escapade of death. J.D. Rockefeller made $200 million, and the Federal Reserve got to collect interest on $30 billion loaned to different countries. World War II. Who's responsible for World War II? Everybody likes to say Adolf Hitler. Well, you know what? After World War I, Germany didn't have any money. They had no money. How did they make bombs? How did they make guns? How did they make uniforms? Adolf Hitler couldn't fund it. We funded it. America, our Federal Reserve, hundreds and millions of dollars in the 1930s was funneled from our Federal Reserve into Germany so that they could build weapons. The American public wasn't aware of it. Louis McFadden spoke out against it. They killed him. This is how World War II happened. It wouldn't have happened if they couldn't afford to build a gun. But we gave them the money. Why? Because we could charge them interest on it. So what's really happening with all this stuff? We're taking American lives. More importantly, we're taking America's future. Thomas Jefferson, one of my favorites, stated, American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflating it and then by deflating it. The banks and the corporations that will grow up around them, around those banks, will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on a continent their fathers conquered. Every baby that's born today owes over $40,000. And that will get paid back to the people who are the bondholders of America. China will take their money back. Germany, who we now owe money to, will take their money back. And the only way that we can pay for it is through your labor. QE2 is going on right now. Everybody who is in the international community that understands banking knows exactly what QE2 is about. It's about inflating the currency. And the rest of the world is really pissed. Now, why are they pissed that we're inflating our currency? They're pissed because they have so much of our currency that when we deflate our currency, we actually hurt them. We're devaluing their assets because they own so much of us. South Korea was the first one. As soon as QE2 was announced, they started screaming, and they stated that we will work aggressively to curb any capital inflows. They don't want our money anymore. We will work aggressively to curb any capital inflows. We do not want American money. Oh, there goes trade with South Korea. China. Very diplomatic response. I love these guys. Not necessarily optimal policy for the world. That's what they came out and said. Not necessarily the optimal policy for the world. Great statement. And then what happens is the Chinese banks, with that very bland statement, go out and they drop our credit rating. So, not an optimal policy for the world. We're going to drop your credit rating. Dropping a company or a country's credit rating is significant in the international trade market. Nobody wants a toxic asset. Now, we're still a AA rated asset. But would you rather have a AA rated asset or a AAA rated asset? Everybody would much rather start buying other people's currency and other people's debt because our rating has been devalued. Germany. This guy's great. Go find a YouTube video on this guy. Wolfgang Schulbach. I can't even pronounce his name. But if you ever see him speak, he's angry enough for everybody. This guy is as German angry as you can get. Horrendous. The U.S. has lost its way. Now, that doesn't sound like a big statement, but these are guys that are standing in international floors and forums with thousands of cameras saying that the United States is completely gone ass backwards. Off the map. that don't know what the heck they're doing anymore. Go to no confidence. There is some good news. Good news is people are starting to wake up. The good news is that we have people that attended this tonight. The good news is that you've got individuals starting to watch movies and get educated. The good news is that there's more information on the internet. The good news is that there's 5,000 people on Facebook that are stupid enough to listen to me to talk about this stuff. So something has to be going on if people are that dumb. The reality is people are waking up. We've got Ron Paul revolution going on. Rand Paul in the Senate. Now, not everybody likes Rand Paul, but the reality is him and Ron are going to introduce bills to audit and end the Fed if possible. The fact that there's a senator that's willing to do that is a big plus. Bill to audit the Fed will be introduced, according to them, as soon as House and Senate reconvene in January. This is my favorite. I have a TV show, I rant a lot, and the person who I complain about the most and probably dislike the most is Sarah Palin. I think that she's a toxic personality. But the reality is, this is great news. And I applaud Sarah Palin, probably for the first time in my life, for doing something. She actually jumped up and she started screaming about the Fed. Why is that so important? Because 35%, mostly what I would consider the uneducated voters, have never heard about the Fed because they're not listening to Ron Paul. They will never turn on C-SPAN because Dancing with the Stars is so entertaining. And now we have a woman who has a lot of attention and a lot of personality speaking to a group of people who are still asleep. And she will wake them up because she's actually hired somebody who's very articulate to write up information about the Fed and educate them. What she's doing for the first time, I applaud greatly. Information's on the internet. People are waking up. There's a bunch of things that you can do when you leave here. You can educate yourself. You can go to federalreserve.gov. The Federal Reserve does not lie to us about what they do. They put it in interesting language, but they pretty much tell you that we're taxing the hell out of you and that you can't touch us and that we, do all kinds of stuff behind the scenes. They're more than happy to tell you that because they realize that the average person, again, would rather be watching Survivor than looking up federalreserve.gov website. So, get upset. Or you can also read The Creature from Jekyll Island. I highly recommend that book. Highly recommend that book. J. Edward Griffin is just brilliant. Get upset and get involved. There's a reason why I say get upset. Because a lot of people say, oh, Jesus Christ, don't people get upset? Absolutely. Because you know what? If you're not mad, you're not going to keep doing this. If you can't get yourself angry about being robbed every day, what are you going to be angry about? And if you can actually get yourself angry enough, you will continue to do this and you will spread the word. So, as you can tell, I get a little upset about this stuff from time to time, and I keep doing it. And that's the only way that people get educated. Write to your legislator. A lot of people like to do that, but actually sit down and write a physical letter. If you can actually write the physical letter, not an email, not a phone call, chances are, if it's handwritten, that's the one